Hello there, everybody. I've got an all-star crew with Darth Raider and Kyle Mullins here. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We're here to play a little game called To Grade or Not to Grade. I haven't done anything on grading in a while, and I've been thinking, what is worth grading? I see this question posed all the time. I found my collection of Star Wars CCG or whatever game. Should I get it graded? Is that a good idea? And I've long time been in the camp of no, but I thought I'd bring you guys on and we can kind of talk about what you should actually grade, why, and when grading is a bad investment. And I will say that if you were doing any of this for your own personal joy, that's great. Like, that's awesome. If you just want to have cards and slabs, that's awesome. But if you're thinking of this as all as an investment and you're, spending resources to get them graded, what's the right kind of card to grade? So, Mark / Darth Grader, what are your thoughts here? You've graded more stuff than any of us, probably all of us put together.
Yeah, at least maybe in the context of Star Wars CCG. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you're describing are posts that are often put on, say, the Facebook group for Star Wars CCG and places like that, where people dig up their old collections from their childhood and they see, okay, these cards, there's a lot of them on eBay and even some of them are graded. So, what do you do with them? And for your average person, if you're just trying to look at it, like you said, in terms of an investment, it may not be the wisest idea to just grade them right offhand because as you're probably familiar with, and some of the people listening who might be in that situation, the grades can go from 1 to 10. And ideally, to make money, at least in the current state of the market right now, you want to pull a 9 or a 10. And unless you were very diligent in handling them and storing them over the years, it's highly unlikely you'll pull a 9 or a 10. It's even difficult, say, in Star Wars CCG to do that pack fresh. So if you kept them in, say, a binder like a lot of us did back in the day without a sleeve and it's been scooting around in there, there's a decent chance that's got surface wear at the very least. So unless, if you have the eye, first of all, do you have the eye to see that this card could get a 9 or a 10? Because many of us in the graded group for the Star Wars CCG group, many of us have been doing it for quite a while. And still when we get returned, sometimes we're surprised, like, oh, I thought that card was going to get a 9 or a 10. And you get it back and it's a 7 or an 8. So, but like you said, Matt, if you're going for it for nostalgia and you just want it to look nice in a slab and protect it, because you're like, that's the one I pulled as a kid. Like, that's the Darth Vader I pulled when I was 10 years old and it has a lot of value to me, then go for it. But if you're just looking to flip it or turn a quick buck, maybe for the high end premiums, or if you really have a good eye for it and you think you can get a 10 on it, maybe we could touch on that later. It seems like any card, if you think you can get a 10, which is very difficult to do, you can make a good turnaround on it. But yeah, probably join the Star Wars CCG graded group on Facebook and get a second opinion on that. And we'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, Kyle, what about you? You've done a fair amount of grading. I'm curious because it feels like with the 8, like an 8 is basically raw, except maybe for some ultra rares, but it's maybe raw value or less. And that's not a good case to grade it. But what's been your experience there?
Yeah, so to be perfectly honest, like I stored a lot, like basically my master set in extra sets in those awful binders with the ring binders, right? Which basically made the entire set like not gradable. Like I didn't even bother with it because I was like, these aren't going to work. I did have a whole binder of extras. I went through and meticulously magnifying glass, looked through all of them. I maybe picked out the top like 3 to 5% of the cards out of there, rubbed them with a microfiber cloth and submitted some of those to grade. Some of those did grade well. However, I think that's the exception, not the rule, given like all the other stuff I've been submitting since going through those few cards has been pack fresh cards, and even those are not good. But my experience from getting random cards off eBay, like singles that are free there, the stuff that's been sitting around, like that generally doesn't grade well, and as a foil, even less so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think as I go down like the rarity of a card, I would say I'm even more like strict on whether I'm gonna bother to pay for it to submit it. So, for example, like something like a main of Boba Fett or Thrawn or Luke or whatever, it's like, okay, this is fair game. But if I'm gonna look at like an uncommon card or a common card, I'm probably going to look at like as many examples as possible and maybe only consider sending in like one or two after I've like really examined that hardcore. Because I'm like, I do not want to have to send in 5 copies. And if this comes back anything less than a 10 or even like a 9, like it's just not worth it. So you're just throwing money away. And I can tell you from experience of having enough like 7s and 8s and 9s and a few random 6, 5. Well, anything less than 5 is a curiosity and that'll sell, but it's all a loss. Like it's all
Right.
a loss. And as we've seen right now, like everything you can see on eBay, the stuff that's really going to make money is the PSA 10. PSA 9s are going to command like, you'll get your grading fee, the cost of the card, maybe a pinch more. There's a few exceptions to that, obviously, but everything else, like, maybe you crack it unless it means something personal to you. You've lost on that card.
And this is actually a point that I think about a lot. I've done 2 submissions to PSA, and while it is not complicated, it is a bit tedious, right? And there is a time suck in sending it in if you've never done it before, figuring out how to sequence the envelope correctly. There's also like, it might be $15 to grade a card, but you got to pay for like insured shipping. And so it is not a cheap endeavor to just send in 20 cards because PSA is running a special. You might end up spending a little bit more than you expect.
I think I'm just lucky that I literally have saved like every top loader like since I've collected cards since the 90s, and I just threw them in a box. So like I haven't had to buy top loaders, for anything. I always just dig into my box and can get them, right? But otherwise you're paying for that, right? Like even the little like glass boxes or like the cardboard storage boxes, like everything adds up as you like keep getting more and more. The penny sleeves, I buy those by like the thousands. You still lose them. They're on a one-way trip, right? So like if you don't have a stack of that stuff, like you'd start to feel that after a while.
I had a surprising moment when I went to the local game store and bought a 25 pack of top loaders, and it was $7. And I was like, wait, these are not as cheap as I thought. I thought they were free, but like 25 doesn't get you very far. And $7 isn't a lot, but if you're actually, putting 100 cards in, you just spent $30 on pieces of plastic. I'm sure you can get it cheaper online and stuff, but none of these.
For one way, like you're sending it off just so it's protected in shipping, essentially. Then you never see it again. I would love to know what they do with all those top loaders, like all the.
They had a giant bonfire.
Maybe they sell them
going into the air. Mark, did you want to come in with something?
Oh no, just I was just thinking of some of what we talked about in the pre-show, and I was just going through it in my head. So I'm ready when you are, whenever you want to direct it. But I'm having a good time listening to your conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this intersection of if something is hyper collectible, then people are going to want to collect it in sort of a nuanced or like gradation way, like a Darth Maul ultra rare foil. Like I would. A raw or graded, I kind of want it either way. And I think there's a few examples of this for like ultra rare, interesting foils. Like I wouldn't do the P59 from Reflections 3 because I don't think people think it's that interesting, but like Maul or pretty much just Maul, maybe Thrawn, but like these are just like interesting pieces that casual people are going to collect. One thing I think we were talking about a little bit before is whether you use PSA or Beckett or any of the other services that have come up, which I think some of them might not be doing super well now. I think the state of grading has sort of consolidated a little bit. There's a bunch of companies that tried to take advantage of PSA's backlog, right, and appeared, and now I don't know how they're kind of doing. And so I'm curious what you guys think about other grading, PSA versus Beckett versus others.
I guess I'll start there. I have more of a background here, although I think Kyle's been a little bit more adventurous than I am as far as branching out. And just for some context, I got a pretty big submission in, about 400 cards, if I recall, right before that giant backlog over COVID at PSA. So, and I think at least half of those, if not more, were Star Wars CCG, which at the time was kind of a groundbreaking thing because there really weren't very many of them for sale. And for a while, I was probably one of only maybe a handful of people selling them on eBay. I went with that because it's pretty large in the sports card universe, if you will. PSA is king over there. So I figured if people were, sports card people were interested in Star Wars, that's probably where they would look first.
Sure.
I know in other card games, maybe Kyle or Matt, you can expand on that a little bit. Other card games. Like I've heard Magic the Gathering, like a lot of those Power 9, they like BGS because it gives the subgrades. But and I see the appeal of that. But then yeah, there's other newcomers like maybe not newcomers. I guess CGC is kind of a newcomer, although they graded comics before. Their cards are kind of a new feature. I actually really like their cases, but as far as value goes, I think it's just what people are familiar with. Like people are used to PSA and a little bit less used to, but still used to Beckett, and everything else is kind of people are trying to figure out how exactly they feel about that. And I don't know, Kyle, if you have initial thoughts, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, so even like now, like I've had like I have 3 active submissions. Like I have 2 at PSA right now. One's for 50 cards with Star Wars CCG and other Galaxy stuff. I have another order that's for like maybe 26 Lorcana cards, foils. And then I have an order at Beckett for about 20 one-piece cards, because one-piece collectors are big into Beckett. That's just like what they're gravitating towards. And those are commanding the premiums in the resale, because people want to see those like 0.5 differences, because the quality of the cards from Bandai is amazing on those cards, is fantastic. I don't think I've ever seen a nicer quality card, frankly, than some of those really rare one-piece cards. If you haven't seen them, you should find some and just take a look at them. And then for like my personal stuff, I have like my bounty hunter set. I'm literally going for every single numbered card, and like a lot of the autos and stuff. That's for me. I'm doing that with HGA because I want them to be uniform in the customized label format that I've kind of picked out for it. So when I display it or share it, it's all like uniform and the same. And I also do like other funky autos, like the Stranger Things cards I collect. And there's some other oddball cards that are more artistic that I think would display really well, that I'm less concerned with what the resale value is on it in the next year or so, because I don't know. I don't think people search for things like HGA, right? So I think it depends on.
Yeah, they look nice though. Those Star Wars, like those ones with the backgrounds that you get put on them, like those are amazing looking.
Yeah, I pop into the HGA group, which has a very active, loyal fan base of HGA fans, right? But it's kind of an echo chamber for those who like it, right? Like I don't know if it's like the passerby is going to see it, but from like a display standpoint, like it's phenomenal. Like it looks amazing. I've shared pictures of my display stuff, and that's a conversation piece. So for me, I love that.
Yeah, I mean here's the one that's got the upside
for the
down
PSA stuff.
Oh yeah, that's fun. They did that. The upside
yeah,
down
because they made.
They're really cool.
Yeah.
But PSA has registry sets, right? So I'm kind of drawn to like with the Lorcana foils first chapter. Like I could get a Lorcana first chapter PSA 10 foil set, and that's like doable. And throw it on the registry. And I'd like to do that for Star Wars CCG. I'm just annoyed that like they have the lists according to JP, but they're not like adding them. I think if they had those there, I would probably be much more like, oh, I need to get more packs of this to rip this to get into that set to kind of show off that registry stuff. And I'm sure other people are waiting to post that stuff there. But the registry stuff was big with like currency too, because it's a huge flex. Like people don't know who has these cards, right? But then you see them and you can connect with other collectors, like the super collectors. We're showing that off. So like right now, I have like some Japanese. My Japanese Star Wars CCG graded stuff is all in its own like display. I don't think there's like a custom showcase you can do on your dashboard, right? But I'd love for that to be in a registry so other people can find it,
Kyle, you're just reminding me. At some point, I want to do a show just called "The Weird Things We Collect." I had no idea there's a Stranger Things game. Yeah, that is one of the.
Well, it's not a game per se. It's more of like collectibles, but like these are numbered to 25. These are numbered to 50. These are numbered to 99. And then I have like some.
You had it right next to you. So it's very
like relics and autos. Let me see. Well, this is some other stuff. Now I've gotten into like Goddess Story and other manga cards, but I think they look really cool. You can't really see it on here, but like autograph cards, like I'm gonna grade that with HGA, and they do like a custom label with it behind, because frankly the label's less important, and even the authentication, because it's already an official card, right? So it's more of just like the auto itself. You're really getting the value of the auto itself. And I find that with like other autos that are like officially licensed by Topps, like if you get an auto from Mark Hamill, whether it's raw or graded, like it's probably going to command like a pretty good premium. I don't know if there's going to be like a huge up premium, like if it's a 10 or authentic, right? You're more like just paying because that's an auto and it's encased and it's, preserved.
Yeah, it's also like presented in a way that you can display.
Well, you could give it to somebody. You could put it in their hand and they could look at it, right? Like you wouldn't do that if it were just like the card in a penny sleeve. You wouldn't do that, right?
So I want to play a little game with you guys, whether you should grade it to grade or not to grade. So I've kind of a list of a few things here, and I'm wondering whether you think we should grade these things. So
Okay.
the first thing on my list is Lorcana. Do we think this is a good product to grade right now? We're talking like early 2024. Is this a good thing to grade with sort of like a long-term collecting community? I think it is because Disney people are Disney people, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts.
Do you want me to go? You go. Okay.
Yeah, you go for it first. I'll follow you.
Enchanted cards, definitely. However, if you go that route, you run the gamble a little bit of whether if it comes back a 9 or less, you will take a hit on the value. But if it gets a 10, it will increase the value. So you could also just sell it raw and get a really solid, value out of it. But yes, I would grade those. Right now, first chapter foils as a whole are doing. You'll get the fee of grading it plus the value of the card plus more right now. That price has been climbing, I think, as people realize, it's actually quite difficult to get a foil card. In the pack, right, you're going to get your commons, your uncommons. You'll get either a rare, like there's 2 slots for like either a rare or super rare or legendary rare, right? So you get kind of 2. And then there's the foil slot, which could be, it's just 1, right? And it could be common, uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you need to open at least 200
right?
packs.
Yeah, so the
4 packs, right?
Yeah, so the foils are going to be like, 25% of the volume, like of the population, right, at the end. So it's going to be harder. So as of right now, that is worth grading. But if it's less than a PSA 10, which 90% of them should be like a PSA 10 right now, unless you really screw it up, that will probably give you raw value of it. So, but I would still say yes on those. Base cards, no.
Okay. Mark, what about you? What do you think?
So I'm disclaimer, I don't collect Lorcana and I'm a little bit out of the universe, so to say, but I think based off of what Kyle's described and what we kind of seen in our experiences in Star Wars CCG, yeah, if you think you can get a 10 on something and it's a pretty hot commodity, again, if you have enough of an eye to see that, as long as you can flip it before, let's say, I don't know if Lorcana, like, I don't relate too much into it. I don't know what the long-term prospects are, but in the short term, I don't see how you could lose if you can get 10s and flip them. Like, you should be able to make money off of
Let's
that.
move on to
There's
our next
another
question.
asterisk on that, though, because it's the first set,
Yeah.
right? The first chapter, first set, that's different, right? So, like, Premiere is always the big one, right? Pokemon, first set. Like, everyone talks about that, right? Like, the first set, alpha set, right? Whatever. Like, that's always going to be the big cheese. So,
See, I tend to differ there because I actually think that first set means it's going to be printed probably until the game. It'll be printed for a long time, right? It'll continue to be printed because people will think they need to get the first set. Like, whereas Alpha was very special for Magic because no one knew what they're doing. Like right now, Ravensburger's found a way of pushing like the print machine, and I just don't see an economic reason for them not to print more of the first set. But
economically, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if they'll actually do it.
yeah.
I don't know.
But I have another one on my list here. So to grade or not to grade, the random CCG you found in your closet, right? So it's from whatever, X-Files, Buffy. My answer is unless it's a real IP, no. But Mark, I'm curious to hear what you think.
I actually did this. So in COVID, I was a little bit too far ahead of my time. So I graded a few of those Digimon cards, which actually gained popularity, I think, within the last couple of years. But like I listed a few of them on auctions and they went for like 99 cents. And some of them were like PSA 10s, but no one was really looking for it. I suppose I could have just left it as buy it now, but who knows how long. I guess it would have been until it got popular and then it would have been okay had I known that would happen. But Yeah, unless you want it for your own good, I don't think it's worth it for unless you can find out maybe prospectively you put out feelers. But if you don't know anything about it and you can't find any sales data about it, probably not worth it from a financial perspective.
Yeah, this is just a good reminder to me that whenever you're buying or selling anything, you have to like there's someone else on the other end. Like someone else has to want this thing that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of this stuff, like Young Jedi, I have a master set of Young Jedi. I think it's cool. There are 200 other people that think it's cool, and that's it. It's not like this marketplace of like 200 might even be generous, right? It is like a small community that there's just not buyers lined up on the other end for all the sellers, or at least at the price points they want. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of stuff from like the 90s and stuff just kind of got printed to death, or there's like not an audience for it really. The more modern stuff, because it has, variations of the cards, foils, numbered cards, ultimate images, stuff that makes it feel even more scarce, like a layer on that. Whereas a lot of those like earlier stuff didn't have that.
Yeah.
So it's just like you could get the whole set and be done. It's like, why would you grade that?
It's fascinating to me how companies have sort of mastered the collecting formula, right? Adding in alternative images, adding in, enchanted, like 6 different rarity levels. Now we're in serialized. It was sports cards. Some of the cards include like a piece of jersey or like an autograph. Like there's so many variations added in to like feed into the collector / gambler mindset for you to get to open more product up, right? Because that's ultimately what this is about. All right, the next one I have on my list is a high value item that is in bad condition. So maybe it's an ultra rare foil, maybe it's like an alpha set, something, but it's in bad condition, right? Is that a good thing to grade? We'll go to Mark first since he's on my right.
So I feel like for a lot of those, you would know if you just went out and looked for it. Like if you've got some classic baseball card, like, Honus Wagner or Mickey Mantle or whatever, all those old cards that are going to be, big part of that really is just the authentication to make sure it's not even fake. It's like,
Sure.
If you're in that realm, then of course it's worth it. Let's say you brought up like an ultra rare foil, like in Star Wars CCG. It might be worth it because I think was it you, Kyle, who pointed out like the low grades are kind of like oddballs. So in that sense, if it really is like low enough that you think it might pull a 1 or 2 or a 3, it's odd, but I might say it might actually be worth your while because there might be someone trying to complete one of those sets. But if it's kind of like, I don't know, you think it'll pull like a 7, then it's kind of more in that, I don't know, it might be if you feel like it, but you're probably not going to get much, but you're probably not going to lose much either. But you probably have to submit it in bulk. So at that point, you're kind of like, I don't know, maybe. If you're going to submit some other stuff, might be worth
I
it.
guess also if it's like a high value item, like an old baseball card, it might actually be quite expensive. Like the PSA is like, oh, this is a $500 item, therefore it's not.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You'll pay a premium just for the value of the card. But again, at that point, it probably is still worth it just because people will know it's authentic versus, I don't know, maybe you just faked it somehow. Yeah. It's good for that peace of mind.
Yeah, I'd say like a middle ground between like the old baseball cards, which yes, you definitely grade no matter what, and something more modern where it'd be like, well, that's kind of silly. I'm thinking maybe like those, those top Star Wars cards from like the 70s, right? Like most of them are in kind of rough shape or poorly centered, or have other issues, right? And probably wouldn't grade better than like a 5, right? So in those cases, no, I wouldn't bother. But if you happen to have one that is excellent centered and like in excellent shape, then yes, grade that, because those 9s and 10s will definitely command a premium. But everything else, no, I would not. So I guess I'm just thinking like in terms of that. With a Star Wars CCG, like, I don't know. Like if I was bored, maybe I'd send something that I had like as a 1. But I don't think I have anything that's trashed like that. I think I've given up all that stuff in bulk lots before, and now I'm kind of wishing I had some of all the odd color ones, this crazy off-center stuff. Like I've thrown that in bulk boxes and forgot about it. So,
all right, I have one more for you guys to grade or not to grade. This is one I want to pick a game that is brand new because I think it's interesting to think about an emerging market, which is Star Wars Unlimited, which I think comes out like this weekend, next weekend. Would you want to be in the first wave of people grading? I believe they have Starship there's some sort of ultimate rarity. I forget what they're called, but would you want to get into grading something like brand new and figuring out if this is going to be a thing or not?
If you could get the product early and you could get it turned around really quick before PSA really knew what the value was of it, then you could get a huge like payday off of it. But otherwise, like I would probably let the market mature a little bit. I don't know.
I don't know if I would. I would try to flip it right away. Try to get on it and flip it. This is the Fantasy Flight Games one. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
recent
the
one.
one with the goofy art.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of people who see potential value, and I could from one perspective see that, but kind of the track record there, I don't necessarily have confidence of how long those card games are good for this world. So I might try to get in and flip it, but I wouldn't get a 10 with the sense that this is going to be worth something in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't spec on it. You'd like take the like, oh, I'm gonna get my money back and then some, and then be done.
This has been my thought for a while with any game. Like, I don't want to be the one creating the market. Like Lord of the Rings TCG, it's a cool game. I think it doesn't trade really well because the cards get kind of scratched easily due to the paper quality, but it's just like people resist it. There's people that are upset that you're doing something with your collection. Like it is wild how like rabid some people can be about like, how dare you do something with your personal possession that I don't like.
I see the drama in
No
that
comment.
group. They really don't want it. There's a few people pushing that boundary, but because I've thought about it, I'm like, oh well, I have some sealed product. I could rip some, just send it in. Like I don't even know what it is, but I think I'd start a firestorm.
I'll share this just because you often have those unpopular opinions, Matt, on your channel. And well, I think I don't know, we call it mature. That sounds too pretentious, but in the Star Wars CCG market, when I was kind of doing my thing, I probably took quite a bit of heat from that. But my unpopular opinion that I want to share is that I think for the long-term health of these out-of-print dead CCGs, it's actually good for the long-term health to have a healthy collecting component. And I think an aspect of that is grading. Otherwise, you get a slowly dwindling usual suspects over time of the same players going to the tournaments. And I think that in the long run, it would be good if we can get some collectors in that, oh, this is a pretty fun game too. And it's got a, players committee and they're making new cards. I think it's healthy to have. So that's my unpopular opinion.
No, I think it's a pretty popular opinion. I think for any card game to be successful long-term, whether commercially or not, it just needs to have players and collectors. And somebody.
But part of that, because of the way collecting has evolved in modern times, is grading, just because that's what collectors have gravitated towards, at least in a lot of card collecting categories.
Yeah, I agree. Any kind of final thoughts here as we wrap up, guys?
I was just thinking, like, generationally, I think, younger collectors are just going to be kind of bred into the idea that grading is very much a normal thing when, like, at least in currency, like the old guys and the guys who've been doing it forever, like, they just didn't care about grading. They weren't doing it. But, like, the more younger collectors that came in, like, it was basically like, oh, it's not graded? Like, that's weird. Like, why would I buy this? Like, how do I even know it's legit? Like, you're asking for $1,500 on this, and like it's just in a weird plastic slip. How do I know it's not counterfeit? Like I know we're not really there with like some of the modern stuff, but I think it's just going to be like Mark said. It's just going to become like the norm. And for a game that is dead and is not getting any better, and the product continues to be ripped and less of it, like I think you should somebody should be a steward and grade it. I mean, we're lucky enough to have somebody like JP who, if nobody else does it, we still have one of everything, I feel good knowing that it exists, right? Like somewhere it's preserved.
I think I'll close with just the thought of condition matters, right? That's why we're even here talking about this stuff. The amount of times I've had something described as like pack fresh and I get it and it's like a dog chewed on it, right? Condition matters so much. How you choose to store something. Like if you have $100 card and you're just sticking it in a drawer, well, it's not going to preserve the value because like people want it and they want it in the best possible condition, right? And that's why we have grading.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off both your thoughts too. Yeah, it's really nice like having that grade when you go on. I'm sure you've had experience of the eBay near mint, right? You go buy something, you get it, and you're like, oh, I don't know. Like it depends on what your definition of near mint is clearly.
Yeah,
And
right.
clearly you have a different definition than I do. So it's really nice to have that assurance. And then I think also it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It just shows how things have changed where people like we're talking about these ultra modern games where they print it like it was the Bandai cards you were talking about, Kyle, and they're already in great condition, but it's just the norm to grade it right out of the pack. It's not even just for things that you want to, old things that you either want to say, oh yeah, it's still in good condition, or you want to say that it's valid. So I just think, yeah, just the way things are currently going. So,
Yeah.
and to win it.
Well, let's wrap up there. I think my final thought is, to grade or not to grade. If you want to grade it, it's kind of fun to do. Getting return is fun. Getting the bill from PSA is not always fun, but it can be more expensive than you think. So that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for hanging out, guys, and we'll catch everybody next time.